This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on. The church beginner mandate. Get it on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. That is Mark Garrigus coming to you from New York City. Good to speak to you, Mark.
Good to speak to you. And I want to plug one of our sponsors. I'm going to have to start massaging my hair with whatever you're doing because you look like 10 years younger. It's crazy.
Madison Reed,
and
mister.
I'm looking at myself. I'm thinking, who's this old man who's hanging out with this youngster? It reminds me of earlier this week. I'm here in New York, and I had dinner again with Douglas Pinsky. Mm-hmm. And that is Dr. Drew's oldest triplet. And Jake's longtime partner in crime. And I was thinking, if only Sonny was like 5 years older. How old is Sonny now?
He's 14, but he acts like he's 41. So,
well, do you think he would hang with the group and do a? I think he could because I saw him. I told you the other day walking down the street in La Cañada, and it's a very put together kid.
His dream is to hang out with Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager. So I'd call him an old soul. So speaking of Drew, I spoke to Drew earlier today, and he said the New York Restaurant Association, I'm going to paraphrase, but is planning a class action lawsuit against the state or the governor, whatever it is. And he said, "Is that Garrigus?" And I said, "It sounds like Garrigus, but I'll ask him."
Yeah, no, but we're in the mix of an equally, I think, even better lawsuit than that group, although I like their lawsuit a lot. I've got one where the landlords are literally the state. And so the state's not going to be able to find refuge anywhere. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned that. Just minutes before we got on, I was on a Zoom, or actually it was probably just a phone call, argument in federal court in California on the business interruption. And the insurance company's position there is that since we can do takeout, that therefore we weren't closed. And furthermore, since the mayor's order was because of a virus, that the virus exclusion holds. So what that leads me to believe is if you've got a policy where there's no virus exclusion, and for instance, you're a nail salon and you're completely closed, or a hair salon that was completely closed, that the insurance company is going to have an awfully hard time based on the transcript of the argument I just did with them.
Well, that brings us to Nancy Pelosi and her salon trip, which
people are going to do what people are going to do.
Oh, we got that drop ready for you. Now, again, my thing with almost everybody is I don't fault the person for going into the salon and getting their hair, the roots dyed or their hair blown out. That's what I've been doing. That's what many people are doing, some bootleg version of that. That's what we've been forced underground. I mind the part where you wag your finger at everybody, shut down the economy, and then do it. That's my part. It's not the actual doing it part. It's like the preacher who's preaching fire and brimstone about the gay lifestyle. My part is when you blow a guy in the bathroom at the airport. I don't have a problem with the blowjob. I have the problem with the lecture before the blowjob.
Well, I'd like to say we were early money. I had my client, Jason, over at Starring, famously do a press conference, 2 weeks ago or 2 episodes ago. And he announced he just wasn't going to do it anymore. It made no sense. And it does make no sense. I mean, it made no sense from the get-go that you just made these, that basically that the politicians were making decisions as to who are the winners and the losers, who's essential, who's not essential. I just, that's not America. That's not our kind of capitalist society. It's not supposed to be dictated from up above. In fact, that's kind of a throwback to the old Soviet 5-year plan, where they would dictate, this is the group that's going to do well, this is the group that's not going to do well. And it's the oldest story in the world in America. Nothing turns off Americans more than hypocrisy.
Right. And you're so right. Like, it's who are the winners, who are the losers? You know, Trader Joe's winner, Amazon winner, losers, salons, churches, gyms. Those are the losers. Like, oh, did Mark fall off? Sorry.
Nope, just his video. Keep going.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so we have.
And interestingly, I want to add to that a little bit. I want to dig in just a little bit more. How do you justify? I've got a client who sells patio furniture, and he's in, I believe, 6 different counties. How do you justify telling him he can't open, yet you've got somebody down the road at Target that sells patio furniture, but because they've got groceries in there, they're allowed to open? Or same thing with a Home Depot or something. How do you just start making those distinctions and not saying that that's a takings under the Constitution? I just don't get it. I never get an answer to it. Today's argument with the business interruption was, well, we've got a virus exclusion, and furthermore, even if we didn't, it's worse because you can't prove that the mayor, Garcetti, shut you down because your fine dining restaurant could have done takeout. I said, well, what are you talking about? And then the argument is, well, you didn't lose your property. You could still go in it. I said, yeah, but I leased the property or as a tenant to serve people who would sit down in it. The customers couldn't come in it. And apparently that's a distinction that's lost on the insurance company. It's a distinction that's lost on the politicians. And I think, I'm going to predict you're going to see one of the greatest cataclysmic economic meltdowns because of this nonsense. I see guys, I'm here in New York, they're going out of business by the day this week. I mean, every single restaurant, just in this little area where I am, all of my favorite haunts, all out of business. It's just astonishing.
Well, so let me ask this question then. Speaking of businesses and what's going on, I'd heard once or twice that some of these businesses weren't insured for looters or weren't insured for being firebombed or versions of that. Is that something that's true? Do you have to take out a separate insurance for looters or for being firebombed, or how does that work?
Well, look, the insurance companies, once again, that was also in the argument. They were arguing, they go back to a case in I believe it was 95, where they were arguing that during the riots, that was because a curfew was imposed. If your particular place didn't get the physical damage, just the fact that you shut it down, you shouldn't get business interruption. The insurance is far and away the biggest racket that has ever been invented. It's one of the reasons why Berkshire Hathaway does so well, because they just basically take your money and then they fight you tooth and nail until you either give up or will settle later on. And it's a complete scam. It's a legalized scam, but they take your money, they invest, they do whatever they want with it, and then they fight you and grind you. And at the same time, they do these campaigns that are kind of anti-lawyer, take the lawyers out, frivolous lawsuits, also that contingency lawyers can't stay in business to try to collect insurance, because who can afford it? I mean, this company, the coffee shop right here across the street, just moved all their stuff out on Wednesday. I was asking them if they had business interruption, because I was upset that
insurance, right?
Yeah, business interruption insurance. They said, yeah, but no lawyer will take it because we've only got $100,000 and the insurance company has denied us and they've got all these exclusions. It's a racket. And, these politicians, what drives me crazy, California is a perfect example. We've got the first openly gay insurance commissioner. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. He advertises himself that. It's first openly gay insurance commissioner. More power to you. That's fantastic. You broke that glass ceiling. Why not come out of your hiding place and issue an edict that if you want to do insurance in California, you pay business interruption and you don't hide behind nonsense arguments that make everybody have to jump through so many hoops. Why not do something? You could do it. You can clearly say, hey, if you want to sell insurance in this state, you don't get to hide behind this. Have they done that? Of course not. What do they want to do? They want to tell people, as business insurers are fleeing because they don't want to pay for wildfires anymore. Then the governor's solution is, let's tax the people who actually are creating jobs at 54% in California. Well, how does that make sense? You want to tax somebody, tax the insurance companies who aren't paying, who've been collecting, in my case, been collecting insurance premiums, Travelers has, for over a decade. They're just sitting on all that money. And the only person who can afford to go to court, federal court, all over the place is me. Other than that, who's going to be able to afford that?
It's a very interesting business model that I never really thought about. It suffers inherently. It suffers just like the old gift certificate model would suffer, which is they'd get your money and then you had to argue with them about giving you change or return or receipts or whatever it is. But it's sort of like in all other businesses, if you sell automobiles, then you have a product and someone purchases your product and then they drive away with your product. But the insurance business is like you going to a sandwich shop and paying for a sandwich you never receive for 8 years. And then at some point you go in and go, now I need my sandwich. And they go, yeah, we've discussed that.
Yeah. and by the way, the meat that you paid for in your sandwich 8 years ago, we've decided is no longer healthy. So therefore we're not going to give it to you.
Right.
And this is the killer. They also do stunts, especially Travelers, where they know they've got bad earnings coming out in March. So the eve of the earnings, they sue me, they're insured, to divert away from the fact that they're not paying any claims. Then I said, okay, that's fine. I'm making a claim under my policy for you to defend me when you sue me. And they say, no, sorry, we're not going to pay for that either. It's a complete scam. I've never seen it. If you tried this in any other business, you'd get indicted. But the insurance companies, they own hook, line, and sinker the courts and the authorities. I mean, they are the big bad wolf. They and Big Pharma kind of control the game.
All right. Well, let's talk about Nancy Pelosi, because I really, whenever I hear things like this, I always think about you and if she was your client and she said she was set up. We'll play the clip. She went to a salon. She wasn't wearing her mask for portions of it, and she claimed she was set up. So let's hear that.
There are many over the years. I've been there many times. I appreciate the question, and let me just say this: I take responsibility for trusting the word of a neighborhood salon that I've been to over the years many times, and that when they said, well, we're able to accommodate people one person at a time, and that we can set up that time, I trusted that. As it turns out, it was a setup. So I take responsibility for falling for a setup. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Do you think you owe the service industry an apology? I just spoke to a San Francisco barber who's a fan of yours. He supports you, but he thinks you owe the service industry an apology.
Well, I don't. I think that they owe, that this salon owes me an apology for setting up.
This person feels like a sociopath to me. Like, that is crazy. First off, how do you get set up if you called and made an appointment? Now, she could have been set up and that she was filmed and they released it. That part's true.
No, this is the ignorance of the law excuse. Mm-hmm. She's saying set up in the sense that I relied on them. Interestingly, again, always talking through the prism of my own experience, I bid on, I don't know, I'm going to say 15 Zoom court hearings or 15 court calls so far, suing. By the way, I represent countless salon owners, countless nail salons, things of that nature. I can't tell you how many times I've made the Nancy Pelosi argument, which is, in essence, this guidance, so-called guidance by Governor Newsom or by Mayor Garcetti it makes no sense. You can't make any heads or tails out of it. It's inexplicable. You don't give people a clear notice or any kind of ability to decide what they can or can't do. The exact same thing that happened to her, I've got a salon owner in a county of California who received a citation. We talked about it 2 months ago. Remember, I told you, I believe it's Riverside County. She was doing one customer at a time in her salon. The police came out and they cited her with a misdemeanor. I've got the guys last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about on the show. The police came out. Gary, don't you have the picture of the police in the SWAT?
Yeah, I'll put it up in a moment.
Yeah. I mean, so this whole thing, I really don't understand why this is so difficult for most people in the criminal justice system. And I do think that judges are somewhat, as soon as they make a step, there was one judge, Judge Chalfant, who made an order a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the ink wasn't dry on him stamping the order on one of I think it was Grace Community Church. And he was reversed summarily by the Court of Appeal. Here's our guy right here. That's what happened when he announced, he didn't even have somebody in there. He announced that if you do it one at a time, and they came and they gave him the citation. He got it.
He
was cited.
Official officers in the background of the salon with the owner in the foreground taking a selfie, basically. We'll put it up on the website.
Or you can watch this episode at youtube.com/reasonable doubt podcast.
Better yet.
I always make this disclosure because all of the twits on Twitter will say whatever. I have a left bias. However, at the same time, I believe, set that aside and be able to judge it. Just be even-handed about it when you do it. To say that I relied on the salon owner and that I was set up, you know what? I don't doubt that she was set up. I mean, I'll admit some other bias. I took one listen to the salon owner in her interview, and it didn't take me more than 12 seconds to see that she was, if you had sent to central casting for a Trump supporter, that she would have been the person. Gary may have a little thing, you can beg to differ with me, but she appears to be a Trump supporter. And did she set up Nancy Pelosi? Probably did. But at the same time, you always got to watch out where you go. And I mean, she feel like she was set up. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not like that anybody, everybody knows that all the women I talk to who go to salons tell me we go to salons who are bootleg open. They open it Friday night at 5:00 and they open until Sunday at 6. Do you know why, Adam?
Why?
Because they know the one time you're never going to find the state licensing board or the cops going to a salon is Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday.
Right.
So that's the time when they open up. You go in the back door, or you say the magic incantation, and you go in the front door, and they let you in and then close it up.
I spoke to a woman in our neighborhood who's just seen people at her house, which obviously defeats the entire point of spreading the bacteria, the virus.
It makes it worse. The whole idea is you've got a salon, you've got all of the stuff there, you've got something that presumably you know how to deal with. I mean, these salon owners are trained at levels that I swear to God, some of my lawyers aren't trained in terms of the science, the disinfectant, the cleanliness, the not transmitting stuff. The apocryphal story that the governor Newsom used originally in shutting down salons was, and I always forget the state. He says, there were 2 people, they were attendants in the salon, and they infected 130 some odd people. As it turns out, both of the attendants were infected with coronavirus. Both tested positive. Do you know how many of their customers, 140, tested positive?
No.
One. And they cannot do a causal link to the hair.
We had a little technical difficulty there, but hey, can I say this, Mark?
It's just, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be on my soapbox.
No,
I
it's
want
all
to
right.
hear you.
Well,
I want to hear you more.
The thing about Nancy Pelosi being set up, if that's the case, then every time a John, gets busted for soliciting prostitution with a undercover policewoman, that's a setup. Like, I don't like it, but that's kind of how we do things. When you open a house up and you say, hey, pedophiles, I got 11-year-olds in here and they want to party, everyone who shows up gets busted. It's a setup. It's a setup.
What was the name of that guy, Richard something on Dateline, who used to always do the online setups and then sit there and have the guy sit in the kitchen when he revealed himself, the online predators?
Chris Hansen. I'll tell you the best part.
Right?
I'll tell you there's two good parts about those episodes. One is he always confronts them in a very nonchalant kind of way, like
hey, just you getting ready to bugger this guy?
The girl, the undercover woman. Oh, I want to ask you, there's a legal question I've always had in my brain about this, and I want you to tell me. People hate me because I'm trying to figure out legal ways to get out of being busted for being a pedophile by Chris Hansen, and I have two techniques. One of them involves me, and the other one's going to involve your expertise. So first things first. I always said, if you meet someone online and they live in the Fresno area, and you're going to drive from Victorville, and you're going to make the pilgrimage over there, and you think you're going to party with the 13-year-old, the best $8 you'll ever spend in your life is when you get about 20 minutes outside of the town that the underage gal lives in, order Domino's pizza. Small cheese, just a plain cheese pizza, and then just park it out front of the address and wait for the pizza guy to hop up there. And if they open the door and you see a boom mic come out of the door, then you keep driving. It'll be the best $8 you ever spent in your life.
I'm going to do one better.
Hold on. If it turns out,
wait for the Little Caesars $5.99 special.
Right. Wait for the Caesars. Save some real money. But if the door opens and it is, in fact, a 13-year-old, then you guys can enjoy pizza. That's right. Everyone hates that joke. The audience, I've had some people like threaten to throw a chair.
Throw stuff.
They just don't. Oh God! I'm like, and I always go, I'm not for pedophiles, but I am a problem solver. You know. So the other one that's for you, Mark,
yes,
that I've always thought about is the underage actress is always over 18. So she is, in fact, saying she's 13, but she's, in fact, a 21-year-old. Could I beat them on a technicality by saying, you don't know how old I thought this person was? She's, in fact, the person I was having a conversation with was, in fact, over 18 years of age. Oh, Mark just fell off again. Right when I hit him with the super important question, he falls off. Could you make that argument?
Yes, absolutely. You can make that argument. I made that argument in Alhambra a number of years ago. Were
you alone and drunk, or would this have some?
I was in a courtroom.
Oh, okay.
I think the factual, as I remember, the facts were that my guy thought she was underage and she was not underage, and they wanted to prosecute based upon that, and it didn't work. I had another case about 15 years ago. There's this thing called the Protect Act, and this one always just, for some reason, logically or legally made no sense. Under the Protect Act, if you had the mental state to, and I think this guy, I want to say, flew out of Philadelphia or New Jersey, somewhere, one of those states on the eastern seaboard, when he did not commit the sex act here, but he had the intent, according to the prosecutors, to commit the sex act in another country. And I think at the time, as I'm remembering it now, I think it was Pennsylvania. And his intent was to go to a country, and I believe it was Moldova, where the age of consent was 15 or 14, and he wanted to go have homosexual relations with boys over there. And so they prosecuted him for that. And I think the argument at the time, it wasn't successful, but the argument at the time was, well, if the age of consent was 15 here, and at the time it was, and mind you, back in 15 years ago, the age of consent was as low as 14 in many jurisdictions, meaning many states in the US 15 years ago, age of consent 14. So you couldn't make the argument that you were with an underage. But you want to, just as an aside, you want to know a great joke? This is probably why Jake is so traumatized. So I had my assistant, this is 15 years ago, Jake would have been about 13. And I'm trying a case with this guy who's charged with leaving the country to go have sex with 15-year-olds or 14-year-old boys. And I had my assistant fly Jake to Philadelphia because it's during the summer. And the assistant brings Jake in to the courtroom, and Pat Harris, who was trying the case with me, taps me on the shoulder, reaches around the client, taps me on the shoulder, and says, "Hey, Jake's here." I turn around and I kind of give a wave to my 14-year-old son, and my client, who's sitting in between Pat and me, goes like this.
Oh, double take.
Double take.
Jake.
Which became
Jake
Jake referred to him as double take ever after. And I'm sure that in today's milieu, I probably would be filed on for child abuse or something like that. Also, back in the day, that was right around a couple of years on the heels of Michael Jackson, when people used to say, "Would you let your son stay at Neverland?" Frankly, yeah, he's been at Neverland quite a few times. He enjoys it there.
Well, the getting back to Chris Hansen and catching a predator, my favorite part of that is when Chris Hansen, she says, "I'll get some Toll House cookies and sweet tea. Let yourself in." By the way, if a woman ever says "let yourself in," wait, they need to turn the knob. I don't buy "let yourself in." But anyway, they let themselves in, and then Chris Hansen comes walking in, and they talk for a while. And there's two things. By the way, the thing that makes me more scared of these guys is their excuse. Like those guys are like,
there he is.
Yeah, so those guys will be like, no, I didn't drive from Fresno. I didn't drive out to Fresno to have sex with her. Oh, what did you want to do with her? He's talking about a 13-year-old. Shoot some pool, hang out a little bit, have a few beers. Like, wow, you're now scarier than the guy who wanted to have sex. You wanted just to shoot some pool and have a few beers with a stranger, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. I don't believe it, but that's a crazy story. But then at a certain point, the guys are nervous. They go, "Look, I screwed up. I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. I'm never going to do it again." And then at some point, Chris Hansen goes, "You're free to leave." And you see the guy go, "Oh, thank God I got out of this thing." And they take 2 steps off the patio, and the Fresno Popo, this is an interesting thing that you would like. They yell at the guy, "Get down, get down, get down." And as the guy is dropping to the lawn, they all dive on him. Like they yell, "Lay down," but they still tackle him before he actually gets to lay down.
And by the way, if the guy is so compliant that he'll sit with Chris Hansen, who's not exactly an intimidating force, can't you just tell the guy, "Lay down on the ground, hands out," and then just go cuff him?
I've noticed that what cops do is it sort of reminded me of when I was at the Burbank airport and the cop pulled me out of line and he goes, "Could you go ahead and turn around for me?" And I started to turn around. He went real fast. And I'm like, I'm 1 second away from being rotated. What is this? So what cops do is they do a lot of on the ground while they're wrestling you to the ground. Like they should give you a 3 Mississippi to see if you will actually do it on your own before the knee goes to the back. But so many cases going on out there. There's the Jacob Floyd thing, or Jacob Blake. Sorry, I've combined my two shooting victims. The Jacob Blake situation. Some new bits, dribs and drabs of information have come out on that. There's the 17-year-old with the long gun who was doing the shooting in Wisconsin. Some new stuff has come out on both those. I'll tease one. There's things that are confusing. It's sad to me that it's this confusing, but there is Jacob Blake had a knife, and then there's Jacob Blake was going for a knife, and then there's Jacob Blake had a knife on him, and then there's Jacob Blake was brandishing a knife, and then there's Jacob Blake had a knife in his car on the floorboard. It's still unclear, this whole had a knife. I don't know. It seems like he didn't have a knife, and there's two things that are being sort of conflated. There's had a knife, which is not having a knife, but having a knife in the car, it seems to be. And then there is, he went over there and he raped this woman, and then the cops showed up. But he went over there and allegedly raped that woman months earlier, and then showed up, and then she called the cops. But it's unclear what he was doing this time. He took the keys to her car. I don't know what.
And by the way, we going to tease that?
Yes. I'm trying to figure out that timeline. Like, Gary, how come he was over there and then he raped her, but that was in May or some version of that. But there's a lot of blurring going on that I'm having trouble with. I have
a lot to talk about on this.
Okay, I really want to know.
As usual, it's amazing. This is why I love you, like a brother and my BFF. You intuitively understand all of the issues here, and I can give a lot of, and I will on the other side of this. I'll give you a lot of the legal doctrine, but you've already hit onto like 100 years of jurisprudence here. That's amazing.
Thank you. All right, let me hit
sucking up to you.
Let me hit NetSuite by Oracle over here. America's ready to get back to work. But who's going to win the new economy? You need every advantage, and that's where NetSuite comes in. Smart companies run on NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. With NetSuite, you'll have visibility and control over financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. It'll all be in one place. Whether you're doing a million or hundreds of millions in sales, NetSuite gives you the visibility to control and manage every penny. Do it from your own phone. It's that good. Join the 20-plus thousand companies who trust NetSuite. Right, Gary?
That is absolutely right. NetSuite surveyed hundreds of business leaders and as they assembled a playbook of the top strategies they're using as America reopens for business. Receive your free guide, 7 Actions Businesses Need to Take Now, and schedule your free product tour at netsuite.com/doubt. Get your free guide and schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/doubt. netsuite.com/doubt.
So what do you know, Mark?
So let me tell you a couple of things here. I think we had mentioned last week that when you say armed with a knife, the armed with a knife, if what you're saying is armed traditionally means it's in your possession. So that means we just told the story, Jake, about double take. Sorry about that. I'll take one more. Yeah, Jake just walked in. We just told double take. Did it traumatize you? It was very traumatizing. Almost as much as Douglas Pinsky come into the house a week ago, and it took him 3 days to vomit out whatever he had ingested when he was there.
Tell Jake if he takes off his chef's bandana and hangs it out of the right rear pocket of his Levi's, that'll send a message to the rest of his community that he's open for business.
I can't tell him that right now. I'll traumatize him later. So part of what armed with a knife means in your possession, and that means actual possession.
It's got the word arm right in it, if you kind of think about it.
You have to be personally armed. Now, you can use that from a legal. Yeah, there's Douglas right there. Thank God. God he's over 27.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. This picture, you guys
So-
never look drunker.
Yeah.
All right, so
that
armed.
was-
Sorry.
armed. So you can still be, for instance, if he's a felon and you can show that he had constructive possession of the knife in his car, that you could do felon with a, armed felon, and that would be okay. But for purposes of a cop using force, do the analysis. The cop can't just say, just because somebody's got a knife in the car and you see a felon, you don't get, and the felon is fleeing, even if that's on your best day, you don't get to just shoot and kill the felon. This isn't like Call of Duty for felons where you just come out and shoot them. That's why, what do the cops always say? Cops always say, he made a gesture for his waistband. I was in fear for my life. Boom, boom, boom. And we're taught to kill center or whatever. But they didn't say that at first. Now you go into the Twitter sphere and people are blowing up photos. And this looks like it's a knife. I can't tell you how many cases where it's a cell phone. Somebody's holding a cell phone, and the cop story is, I shot and killed him because I thought it was a weapon, and it turns out it was a cell phone. And by the way, he was unarmed there, or inevitably you'll find a weapon, 20 yards away, and they'll claim it was thrown.
Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's that. Now, number two, there was the gentleman who was just killed by the cops in Oregon.
Oh, Oregon?
Oregon, who was accused of killing a right-wing Trump supporter, and supposedly he had a gun.
Oh, that
Gary,
guy
what's the
just
guy's
got
name?
that guy just got shot?
His name is Michael Forrest, and I think it's Rittenhouse. And yes, they issued a arrest warrant for murder yesterday afternoon, and they located him in Washington State, 120 miles or so away from Oregon. And when the U.S. Marshal Service and a big team attempted to arrest him, he reportedly brandished a handgun and was killed in the ensuing exchange.
Well, tell August, because he hasn't booked for Monday. I saw that guy's doing press conferences from his land in Oregon. Sorry, a morbid joke. Go ahead.
I know, but we're in a whole new era. Gary and I have been texting back and forth today. Kyle Rittenhouse is the guy with the long gun who is now kind of a cause celeb, at least apparently, for supposedly defending himself. Let me state a couple of legal theories. Unless I'm missing something.
Are we on Kyle Rittenhouse now?
Kyle Rittenhouse, because I want to contrast it with what we're talking about in Oregon. Kyle Rittenhouse, people are saying, well, he was there and he came armed across state lines to defend property. You don't get, as a civilian, you don't get the right to defend property by using deadly force. It's never been the law. There is a castle doctrine where if somebody is advancing on your castle, your home, can you use deadly force if you've got the requisite amount of fear? Absolutely. But to stop a looter, probably no way, unless you're going to use kind of the law enforcement standard script, which is, well, I was chasing a guy and then he made a turn and I thought he was going to shoot me or do some damage, and so therefore I returned fire. Just chasing a fleeing felon on the basis of property is a hard enough task in most jurisdictions for law enforcement, and generally is not going to work for civilians. I can't tell you how many of these cases we've had over the years, usually in the context of a civilian security guard who shoots somebody who's leaving, who's just supposedly or allegedly committed a petty theft. And I'll give you another one. Remember the case I tried a couple of years ago on Hollywood Boulevard where the transvestite had knifed one of the four guys with my client, then they had chased it and pushed her down and then ran away. And I argued fleeing felon, and I literally had to throw a fit. It was at first denied. She wouldn't even give me the fleeing felon jury instruction, but then subsequently said she would. But then by that time, LAPD had committed Brady error and the case was mistried.
The judge, female judge, you're talking about.
Female judge, correct. Yep.
Yeah. Now, did your client punch this person and is this person deceased?
No. My client's with 3 friends. The 4 of them are walking down the street. The transgender has what I always call is a carpet knife, where they have the razor blade in the
box cutter, utility knife. And it's obvious. It's obvious afterwards because I saw the toxicology report that the person slashed the one of them. The guy goes to his knees. The LAPD had pieced together some videos so you could see it. And then the 3 remaining guys chase this complaining witness, the assaulter, and gets pushed to one person gets pushed to the ground. One person kicks. I claimed my client, and the video supported this, jumped over, but he was charged in any event. And we, like I said, we tried to get a fleeing felon. You would think if somebody knifes you, that's even more of a compelling case for a fleeing felon. Right. So the Rittenhouse.
So you've got that.
Right.
Rittenhouse is saying that he was accosted. It was self-defense. He's going to have to show that. The videos are inconclusive as far as I can tell. Then go to Oregon. Oregon, the now deceased young man who they had a warrant out for was claiming that he committed his killing in defense of somebody who was being attacked and he thought was going to get killed. That is a defense of third party. So if I see somebody attacking you and I think you're going to get killed, and I've got a belief on that, a founded belief, I can use deadly force to prevent you from getting killed. That is a defense. To say I'm going to chase somebody who just broke into engine company and chase him down the street and shoot him, I can't. That's not a defense.
What? But I think in Rittenhouse's case, he's saying he was being chased.
Correct. He's saying he's being chased. Then you get a confluence of both of these. You get whether his story is, or whether it's going to be, was he being chased because he chased somebody first for a property crime and then tried to shoot them? And if he did that and then is being chased, does he get to use a self-defense on that? It's a fascinating, just divorced from all of the political and kind of crazy ideological divide. As a criminal law kind of hypothetical, it's fascinating because in Rittenhouse's case, there's a changing dynamic as to when he can use force. He may not have been able to use force initially on somebody who was doing a property crime. However, if he's being chased and somebody is trying to kill him or do him bodily harm, he can use a reasonable amount of force back. So you see where that how that works?
My layman's sort of take on it is you really need to, if you're defending him, you really need to drill down on the initial shooting. The second shooting where he's running and he trips and someone has a handgun and another guy hits him with a skateboard, that's all self-defense. It's the shot that came before that. That's where you're going to burn your calories if you're trying to defend this guy. The second part, you have video of it. There's a gun. He gets hit with a skateboard. It sort of takes care of itself, the second shooting, in my mind.
Right.
The first shooting's the one you got to clear.
And if you don't clear that one, the second one is meaningless because you don't get kind of this immunity, retroactive immunity. So it's an interesting kind of morphology that unfolds, and you've got to be able to deal with the beginning. And that's one of the reasons why I think Mr. Pierce, who's apparently defending Rittenhouse, has taken so much grief by the criminal defense community for putting his client on the cell phone from custody and have him making statements and things prior to actually seeing what all the evidence is. It's a dangerous kind of, very dangerous kind of tack to take. But, some people do unorthodox things in unorthodox cases.
Well, maybe for that attorney, maybe there'll be some good news. Maybe you'll free Scott Peterson, and then all the ire will turn back to you as the world's most hated attorney versus the guy that's protecting him.
It's kind of funny because on the heels of Scott and having the death penalty reversed, there's a case that I handled 10 years ago, and Bulos Zumat, and that case was profiled on 2020 and Dateline. Keith Morrison, remember, he used to be our anchor man in LA, and then he went on to fame and fortune as being the Dateline guy. And that case was famously, at one point, my client was accused and was convicted at the time of committing an arson to cover up his murder. And the only thing that was left of his girlfriend were her 2 implants. At first, they couldn't even, because the house had burned down, and all that was left were the serial numbers on the implants. And I think later they made a partial identification there. And that case was reversed for the DA putting on false evidence and ineffective, and just within the last 36 hours. So there's quite a bit of, a lot of times these cases that garner so much publicity and kind of ire at the time, through the prism of 10 or 15 years later, you start to see, wait a second, maybe we got somewhat carried away in the moment, I think.
I have a case for you that is it's a pretty straight up cop shooting a citizen, a minor citizen, by the way. The citizen is Hispanic and not black, so it's not really a narrative that the news is really running with, but there's body cam footage of a cop just basically shoots a guy in the back of the head. Now, the guy's a big-time criminal, so I don't care, but he was fleeing, and he was like over a fence, and the cop just shot him right through the fence, just in the back of his head. You must be familiar with that case, or at least have seen it. I don't know. Is it in the Bay Area or Fresno or something? It was up north from where we are.
And that also kind of is a good transition, or at least kind of lets us explicate a little bit. Unless the cop knew and there was some compelling reason, you don't get to do your investigation after the deadly force. I mean, so everybody who says, well, it's a multiple felon or did this or did that. Yeah, okay. But that doesn't let us go back to Call of Duty felon and you get to just take out felons. That's not the law. I mean, you want to change the law to just say you can shoot felons on sight. Then why are we incarcerating them? Just have the death penalty for anybody who gets convicted of a felony. But that's never going to stand muster. So the idea that somebody gets killed and it's a bad shooting, you don't excuse the shooting by the status, if you will, of the decedent. The person who you kill could be a bad person. In fact, it's one of the things that's always kind of intrigued me about when people in my early days used to say, well, what do you do? And what if somebody says they're guilty? How do you defend them? And, the Constitution is set up that you do that defense. And I always say, I don't lose sleep over that. I lose sleep over the ones that I believe are innocent. And by the way, do you ask when you meet an oncologist, do you ask the oncologist, do you take care of people who've got cancer if they're bad or if they're a felon? If they're a felon, shouldn't you just let them die? I mean, there are distinctions or urban kinds of myths or legends that don't make a whole lot of logical sense. And shooting somebody and then later learning that they're a felon, that doesn't justify it.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think in that particular case, they knew who they were dealing with. and they knew that that person may have been armed or may have been involved with the shooting or some version of that. So it wasn't just a complete blind stop. But at some point, the person is running the other direction from where you are. Their back is turned to you, and it just doesn't pose a threat to you. I think sometimes cops, what I've found, sometimes I feel like the cops are using a gun because they can't physically catch up to the person or subdue the person. You know, in the Jacob Blake situation, the cop used the gun because he couldn't really prevent him from doing what he didn't want him to do. It was sort of like he was going like, hey, you know, they wrestled, maybe got the better of him. He was walking away. The cop was saying, stop, you know, and he was like, nah, I'm not going to stop. Don't get in your car. And the cop was like trying to get him not to do it. And he essentially used his gun as a tool to prevent him from fleeing or from driving away. You know, the same situation with the Burger King, and the guy was asleep passed out, I should say, in the line at the Burger King or the Wendy's or whatever the fast food
down
was.
in Georgia.
Right. It's like at a certain point, he out wrestled the cops, he tased the cops, and all that, got the better of him. It's almost like, in a weird way, it's like you have a magical device on your hip. And let's not call it a gun. Let's just call it a magical device. And if you ever get into a situation where the person out wrestles you or punches you or is faster than you or hops over a fence that you can't climb over or wants to get in their car, if you can't do anything about it, reach for the magic button on your hip. That'll stop it. And I really think it's almost that with a lot of these, especially a lot of what we've seen, guys fleeing on the other side of the fence. In that particular case, the story we were just talking about with the minor got shot in the back of the head. Jacob Blake, he was like getting in the car and there's nothing the cop could do about it. So he reached for the magic button. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I know exactly what you're saying. I was reading something this morning. There was a study that came out. And basically, I think actually underestimates, because I've said for years, the two common denominators that I see in most of these killings are that the cop is usually a Iraqi or Afghani war vet with PTSD, and the decedent is usually, the victim is usually somebody with mental health problems. And so then you combine those two things, and that's combustible. And then I saw today where somebody had done a study, I read something where they said 20 or 30% of the victims were mentally health impaired or had symptoms of mental health. And I think that probably grossly underestimates it. But one of the suggestions was, which I've always said, why do we make, and this goes back to Lee Baca, who was famously the sheriff and then convicted in LA County. But Lee Baca used to always say that he runs the largest mental health facility in the world, meaning the LA County Jail. And it's true. I mean, if you're in downtown LA, most of the homeless that you encounter that are, by any objective means, frightening are people in a mental health crisis. And why is that the cops? Why are we sending cops there? These guys went to the academy to, up on the hill or down in Rio Hondo. They're not trained with de-escalating this. Your magical device is a perfect example. The magical device should be between their ears. And they're not trained for this. Let the mental health professionals deal with this. Have some kind of a SEAL Team 6 of mental health whenever you've got somebody who's in a crisis. Because clearly, anecdotally, and now it looks like from a sociological perspective, it's clear that this, and it drives me crazy when I see our vaunted governor talking about homelessness is job one. Well, then deal with the mental health crisis, number one. Stop talking about building more affordable housing. You can solve that problem. The bigger problem, the one that affects or impacts people on a daily basis, is the mental health crisis.
I agree. And then there's another component that exacerbates it, which means it can be mental health and substance. I was talking to Dr. Drew about this. I mean, you talk about a couple, take three of the biggest high-profile cop shootings of the last several months. You have the George Floyd one. That guy was out of his mind. I mean, he was beaked out of his mind. I mean, I don't know if he was hallucinating. He didn't want to get in the car. He couldn't breathe. There was a fentanyl thing. I mean, he had huge levels of drugs in him. And I don't know that the cops are equipped to de-escalate essentially somebody, for lack of a better term, having a bad trip. Like, he couldn't get in the back of the car. He was like, I can't breathe. I got to get out of the car. He was beaked out of his brain. The guy at the fast food place was drunk enough to pass out in the fast food line. The other story more recently about Jacob Blake is the story was, at least from his baby mamas, a couple times a year when he got drunk, he would come over and, problems would ensue. There's a big time substance component to this that no one is talking about. I
look, there's Drew will tell you, and I don't disagree, I've seen it. There is, the substance abuse and the self-medication and all of this, it's all part of a continuum or a spectrum. And I read somebody said today, and I love the line, why is it that mental illness is the only illness that we call the cops for?
Right.
If you're having a stroke, am I going to call the cops or am I going to call the paramedics? I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Part of the stigma, I think, just of the way we approach these things. And it's now at a point where, maybe somebody will listen if we try to solve the problem in a different way. Except
yes.
What ends up happening? It's defund the police. Why don't you just say fund social work as opposed to defund police? Or free the police. I got one. Free the police. Don't make them our mental health professionals.
I'll tease my last quick question for you, which is, I don't know what happened in this Oregon sort of shooting case. Was the cops, was that a good kill, a bad kill? I know he had a gun. Was he giving himself up?
I'm going to make a prediction after you tease.
Okay, let me hit
we'll leave after this tease.
Madison Reed, so Madison Reed has been around for a while, and Madison Reed made high-end hair coloring for women, and women loved it, and eventually they said, well, what about the fellas? And they got a beautiful gray blending, natural color, your hair and your beard, by the way. You can see the before and after shots on their website. No shoe polish look. It is very nice. Lynette likes it for the ladies. I like it for the men. And you get a kit. You get your hair color online. You get the right shade, the right tone, and then you just put a dollop in these gloves they give you, and you just kind of put your fingers through. My color is called Autumn Mist. Because I'm a summer. No, I don't know what it's. I don't know what I just physically matched it. I didn't read the
I thought
color.
It was going to be like Georgian Gray. Or, I don't know.
Swiss coffee.
Salt and pepper. Swiss coffee. Okay.
So I'll go with Navajo Red. I'm just naming. I'm naming paint I used to work with back when I used to paint commercial offices. Look. The point is you match your color up, you put a dollop in your gloves, you just sort of run your fingers through your hair, then you put a dollop of the activator in there and you just do the same thing. You let it sit for 10 minutes, you rinse it out, and all of a sudden you have very naturally more pepper than you do salt. Right, Gary?
That's right. Go to MadisonReedMr.com. That's MadisonReedMR.com and use code Corolla for 10% off plus free shipping on your first box. Again, that's code Corolla.
All right, so I don't know any of the particulars.
Here's a narrative that I'm going to suggest. This guy was if you believe what you read, the victim was somebody who identified as a leader, sponsor, supporter, whatever you want to call him, affiliated with Antifa, and was killed by unnamed federal agents. So you can see where this is headed. You want to let your mind go wild?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he had a BLM tattoo on his neck. So I don't know if he was more Antifa or more BLM or both.
He described himself on social media as 100% Antifa.
Oh, all right. Well, no room for BLM then.
Yeah. And Gary, am I right? What the early reports is that he was killed by a unnamed or unidentified, at least when I was reading it this morning and trying to get caught up, federal fugitive force or something like that?
Yes, it appears by most reports that force was a intergovernmental squad comprised of a lot of different agencies, but headed by the Marshal Service.
Yeah, we're in some very interesting times, I'll tell you.
And do we know anything about if he fired a shot or?
No reports of him firing a shot, but apparently when confronted by armed officers, he brandished a weapon and threatened the officers.
It's so impossible if in fact you have a weapon or holding a weapon. There's almost no scenario where you could actually drop it or put it on the ground or do anything that can't be construed. The shot in the head kid who dropped his arm. Like it's an impossible argument to make. I mean, you and I know what the truth is, but I'm saying it's nearly impossible to say he had a gun and then he moved.
Right.
You know, I told
as I'm screaming, drop it.
I told you when I was walking by your house a number of months ago and a sheriff's car pulled up and the guy jumped out with the shotgun and started running toward me at night and pumped his shotgun as he was running toward me. All I did is hold my arms. I didn't raise them. I didn't want to I didn't want to make myself look bigger like I was trying to scare a
furtive movement.
I literally just stuck my hands out as wide as I could, right to left, just Jesus on the cross. I just put my hands out. It's kind of interesting, and I don't know where you stand on this, but should there be a kind of universal pose, like a cop's running at you with a shotgun? I have no context for this. I didn't know whether to drop down or put the hands up or put my hands down. I didn't really know what to do, so I just instinctively got my hands as far away from my body as I could by sticking them out right to left. And
I can't tell you how many cases I've had where somebody's been shot just for raising their hands, and they said, "Oh, I thought I saw something in the hand, and when he raised his hand, I shot him."
In my own split-second calculation, I was walking my dog. I really felt like putting my hands up looked more aggressive than putting my arms out, like as far away from my pockets as it could be.
In the old days, when just sitting in your car was dangerous, the advice was that you hold on to 10 and 2.
Right.
And you make no movement. I mean, that's kind of been ingrained. And you have to resist the impulse to pull into your center console and pull out registration or your license or wherever you keep it, or you keep it up above in the visor. I just think that there needs to be a rethinking of how we approach citizens when you've got a gun or a deadly force. I just think it's that you just can't. There shouldn't be always an armed encounter. And I understand clearly you can have these various thoughts in your head, and they can be true. Are there times when they need to use deadly force? Abso-freaking-lutely. Are there times when they manufacture an excuse after the fact? Abso-freaking-lutely. And is every case a bad shooting? No. But are many cases bad shootings? And why do we have a problem? And why are there people protesting in the streets? Because too many people, I've seen it. I used to, I would become jaded by it just sitting in the criminal courts building for years and watching guys just lie repeatedly on the stand with impunity. So I get it. I understand it.
I have a last sort of cynical question in a world where the police sometimes like to control the narrative by letting out dribs and drabs of information that sort of help their case, or by not releasing body cam footage. They like to steer things quietly through sort of letting out toxicology reports and things that work for them, right? This knife and this Jacob Blake thing, this knife, I've heard people talk about a knife that had the brass knuckles like kind of woven into the handle. And then there's me who has a pocket knife in the console of my car just so in case I need it. It's not really a self-defense thing. It's more of like open a box kind of thing, or, cut an apple up while I'm waiting outside or whatever it is. They don't say what kind of knife they're talking about. They just say a knife. And to me, there's a pretty big difference between a smallish pocket knife and, Rambo's Bowie knife, right? If, in fact, it was Rambo's Bowie knife, would they let that out? Would they say that kind of knife? Let's say it was a dagger or again, a knife, a machete. You know what I mean? Like something.
Almost always. I mean, I think the fact that they've already said armed with a knife and the fact that it appears, at least so far, that it was a knife in the car tells you all you need to know. I mean, it's the same reason when they use the term. I know all of a sudden people have kind of glommed onto it recently. I've been complaining about this for decades. Officer-involved shooting. What does that mean, officer-involved shooting? The officer wasn't shot. The officer did the shooting.
Right. All right. We're going to do stand-up. I'm doing stand-up, and I'm doing live shows, and I'm going to circle this around to Garrigus, by the way. I'll be in Tempe at the Improv over there, September 18th and 19th, doing stand-up and live podcasts as well. And then Rob Schneider's going to be up on stage doing the live podcast. And October 2nd and 3rd, Salt Lake City, Wise Guys, we're going to do a live Reasonable Doubt out there. That'll be October 3rd. And we'll do a matinee show there. Now, I talked to, the 4th?
It's 4 p.m., I'm sorry.
4 p.m., sorry. It's on the 3rd. It'll be at 4 p.m. Good for me. I get to do 3 shows that day. But I talked to Mike, and I talked to August on the ride in, and he's like, don't forget to plug the Reasonable Doubt live show. And I said, are we flying in with the Garagos? And he said, I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
The only question is, there's only one question that we'll leave to, is whether you're flying back out with me.
We did it one way in San Antonio, and I file it under the blessing department. All right, so the movie, by the way, you can check out all my movies at Chassis, 2 S's and a Y.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's Big Jake. Where's the bandana, Jake? Is it in the pocket, or where is it? Guy's putting the mask on.
Is that better?
No, I meant the one you normally wear, the chef one, the one Al Pacino wore in Cruising. Look it up. All right, what are your plugs, Mark?
Oh, get up to the Hamptons to the Capri Hotel, Naya, pop-up restaurant. Michael Pitsonis is there. Get to the V and Gigi's this weekend, or downtown at Engine Company 28, where Travelers never pays any insurance claims, or 10E, where Travelers also doesn't pay their insurance claims.
All right, Mark, a little homework for you. When you hang up, you will IMDb Cruising, the movie starring Al Pacino, circa 1987, and I think Jake's
to instruct Jake. Okay.
To instruct Jake, yeah, you'll get the whole.
Okay.
You'll get the whole bandana early warning system color code. It's all laid out there. So until next time, Adam Crow for Mark Garriga saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.